Standing beneath the shadow of David's penthouse, Elina ended the call for the 5th time. The line just kept ringing and ringing. For the past 2 months, this was a man who couldn't bear to be apart from her for even a single moment. But tonight, he had shuffled her off to a hotel and turned off his phone. Watching the raindrops race down the window pane, Elina felt a cold, twisting knot tighten in her chest. Was this just busyness? Or was it the echo of a painful history repeating itself? Elina didn't know it yet, but the waiting on this rainy night was about to summon the greatest storm of her life. But why? How did an established, intelligent woman like Elina fall into such a devastating trap? How did a staged wedding one night and a calculated performance of love shatter her perfectly curated life? And where does this web of lies finally end? In justice or in ultimate humiliation? I'm Sneha, and I'll be your guide for today's episode. Let's dive deep into this story and uncover the full, detailed truth of trust and betrayal. The rain began in the early evening. At first, it was just a whisper, a shy, tentative tapping against the window panes. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in bruised purples and deep indigos, the rain found its rhythm. It became a steady, rhythmic drumming, a lullaby played by nature on the roof of the world. In a quiet suburb, just far enough away from the busy hum of the city, stood a house that glowed with a soft golden light. This was Elina's home. It was a beautiful structure built of sturdy brick and framed by tall ancient oak trees that swayed gently in the wind. To the outside world, it was just a house. But to Elina, it was her sanctuary. It was the place where the noise of the world stopped and her own peace began. Elina sat in her favourite armchair, a large, overstuffed seat upholstered in velvet, the colour of dark sage. Her legs were tucked beneath her, covered by a knitted throw blanket that felt like a warm embrace. She was 34 years old, though in this soft light, with her face relaxed and free of makeup, she looked timeless. She held a ceramic mug in her hands, allowing the heat to seep into her palms. The tea was chamomile and honey, and the steam rose in lazy, curling ribbons, disappearing into the air. She took a slow sip, tasting the sweetness, feeling the warmth travel down her chest, settling in her stomach like a glowing ember. Elina was a woman who valued order. She worked for the federal government, a job that required precision, sharp decision-making and a steel spine. Her days were filled with meetings, policies and the constant hum of bureaucracy. But here in the evening, she shed that persona like a heavy coat. Her living room was a reflection of the peace she had fought so hard to find. The walls were painted a creamy off-white, a canvas for the shadows of the rain to dance upon. There were bookshelves that stretched from the floor to the ceiling, filled with novels, histories and poetry. The books were her oldest friends. They didn't judge. They simply waited for her to open them. On the mantel above the electric fireplace, there were no chaotic stacks of paper, no clutter, just a few carefully chosen candles, their wicks flickering with a gentle orange flame, and a vase of fresh lilies that perfumed the air with a faint, sweet scent. It hadn't always been this quiet. There were years, not so long ago, when Elina's life felt like a ship caught in a hurricane. She had known the sharp edges of words and the heavy weight of fear. She had known what it was to walk on eggshells in her own home, but those days were gone. The storm had passed. She had navigated through the wreckage of a broken marriage, through the difficult process of divorce, and she had come out the other side. Now she had this, the quiet, the safety. She looked out the large bay window. The glass was cool to the touch, and outside the streetlights had flickered on, casting glowing pools of yellow on the wet pavement. She watched a single car drive by, its tyres hissing softly on the wet asphalt, the red taillights fading into the distance. It was a perfect evening, and yet in the silence there was a tiny, hollow space. Elina loved her solitude. She cherished the freedom of waking up on a Saturday morning with no one to answer to, of drinking her coffee while watching the birds in the feeder, of decorating her home exactly how she wanted. But recently a thought had begun to drift through her mind, much like the steam from her tea. It was the thought of companionship. Her friends, well-meaning and full of energy, often nudged her. "You're young, Elina," they would say over brunch or during quick phone calls between meetings. "You have so much to give. You shouldn't be alone forever." They talked about apps, about dates, about putting herself out there. Elina usually just smiled and changed the subject. She wasn't sure if she was ready to trust again. The walls she had built around her heart were high and they were fortified. They kept the pain out, yes, but they also kept the world out. Tonight, however, as the rain intensified, washing over the roof in a soothing cascade, Elina felt a shift. It wasn't a desperate feeling. It was softer than that. It was like a seed buried deep in the earth, sensing the arrival of spring. She looked around her beautiful empty room, the empty cushion on the sofa, the silence that was only broken by the crackle of the fireplace and the rain. It was peaceful. Absolutely. But perhaps it would be nice to have someone to share the silence with. Someone to sit on the other end of the couch, reading a book, their presence a comforting weight in the room. She set her mug down on the wooden coffee table. The coaster made a soft clink sound. She leaned her head back against the chair and closed her eyes as she listened to the house settling, the wooden floorboards creaking gently as the temperature dropped, the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen, the wind brushing against the siding. These were the sounds of safety. Elina thought about her career. She was proud of what she had achieved. She was independent. She paid her own mortgage. She drove her own car. She made her own decisions. She didn't need anyone to save her. She had already saved herself. But the heart is a curious thing. It doesn't care about logic or independence. It simply seeks a rhythm to beat in time with. Maybe, she whispered to the empty room. The word hung in the air, fragile and hopeful. She wasn't looking for a saviour. She wasn't looking for someone to complete her. She was whole on her own. She was simply wondering if there was someone out there who could understand the language of her silence. Someone who would perhaps walk through their own storms and come out the other side just like she had. She reached for her phone, which lay on the side table. The screen was dark. For a long time, she just held it, feeling the smooth glass under her thumb. The digital world felt so vast, so overwhelming. A sea of faces and curated profiles. Could something real be found in a place so artificial? She didn't unlock it, not yet. Instead, she stood up and walked to the window. She pressed her hand against the glass. The cold from the outside met the warmth of her palm. Raindrops raced each other down the pane, merging and separating, shimmering in the light. The world outside was chaotic and wet, but inside everything was under control. Elina took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of the lilies and the faint smoky aroma of the fireplace. Her shoulders dropped an inch lower. The tension of the work week finally melted away completely. She turned off the main lamp, leaving only the soft glow of the fireplace and the ambient light from the street. The shadows in the room lengthened, becoming softer, fuzzier. The room felt like a cocoon. She walked to the hallway and picked up a framed photograph from a side table. It was a picture of her on a hiking trip last autumn. She was standing on a peak, wind in her hair, smiling, a genuine, bright smile. She looked at that woman in the photo, at herself, and felt a surge of affection. She had survived. She was here. You're doing okay, she thought. You're safe. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed, a deep, resonant sound. It was getting late. The heavy velvet curtains were drawn, shutting out the street, leaving only the sound of the rain. Rain is nature's way of washing the world clean. It prepares the ground for new growth. Tonight, the rain felt like a promise that tomorrow would be fresh, that the past was truly in the past and the future was an unwritten book waiting on the shelf. Elina walked back to her chair, but she didn't sit. She picked up the blanket and draped it over her shoulders like a shawl. She felt drowsy, a heavy, comfortable sleepiness pulling at her eyelids. The idea of the dating app, the idea of David, though she didn't know his name yet, hovered on the edge of her consciousness. It was a door she hadn't opened yet, but tonight, for the first time in 2.5 years, she didn't lock that door. She left it slightly ajar in her mind. Maybe tomorrow. For now, there was only the peace of the present moment, the rise and fall of her own breath, the steady, comforting heartbeat of her home. She walked slowly toward her bedroom, turning off the lights one by one, leaving the darkness to guard the house. As she laid her head on the cool, soft pillow, the sound of the rain on the roof became a gentle static, a white noise that smoothed out all her thoughts. She was safe. She was home. And she was ready to rest. And as Elina drifts into a peaceful slumber, let yourself follow her. Listen to the imaginary rain in your mind. Let it wash away any tension in your jaw, your neck, your shoulders. You are safe. You are warm. The story will wait for tomorrow. For now, just sleep. The morning after the rain was brilliant. The sun rose with a quiet confidence, filtering through the sheer white curtains of Elina's bedroom, casting long, lazy beams of light across the hardwood floor. Dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight, moving in a slow, silent waltz. Elina woke up feeling different. The heavy blanket of solitude that usually greeted her in the morning felt lighter, perhaps a little more translucent. She made her coffee a dark roast, rich and aromatic, and stood by the kitchen island. The house was silent, but it was an expectant silence. It was the silence of a stage before the first line is spoken. That afternoon, sitting in the sunroom with her iPad resting on her lap, Elina finally made the decision. It wasn't a dramatic moment. There was no thunderclap. She simply opened the App Store and downloaded a premium dating app, one known for its exclusivity, a place where professionals like herself went to find serious connections. She created her profile with the same care she applied to her work. She chose a photo where she was smiling. Not a posed professional headshot, but a candid one taken by a friend at a vineyard. The sunlight caught the golden highlights in her hair and her eyes crinkled at the corners. It was honest. In her bio, she wrote simple truths. She loved old books, rainy nights, and quiet resilience. She mentioned that she had walked a difficult path to find her peace, and she was looking for someone who understood the value of kindness. She pressed save. For a few days, nothing significant happened. There were notifications, small digital waves in her quiet pool, but nothing that made her pause. Until Tuesday. On a Tuesday evening, as the sky was turning a soft shade of lavender, a profile appeared on her screen. David. His photo was calming. He was standing on a balcony, a city skyline blurred in the background. He wore a crisp button-down shirt, the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He wasn't smiling broadly, but there was a gentleness in his expression. He looked steady. He looked like a man who had stories to tell. Elina read his words. He was an executive at a multinational company. He enjoyed architecture and jazz. But it was the last line of his profile that made Elina's breath catch in her throat. Life has taught me that rebuilding is harder than building. I am divorced and I am learning to trust the blueprint of a new life, a rebuilding. That was the word. Elina sent a message. It was short. Rebuilding is indeed the hardest part, but the foundation is usually stronger the second time around. She set the tablet down and went to prepare dinner. She didn't expect an immediate reply, but before the water in her pot could boil, a soft chime echoed through the kitchen. David had replied, and so the conversation began. It started as text on a screen, white bubbles against a grey background. They exchanged pleasantries, the standard dance of two strangers testing the ice. But very quickly, the ice melted. They moved from the app to texting, and then 2 nights later, David asked if he could call. Elina was sitting in her sage green armchair, the same spot where she had watched the rain. She hesitated for a moment. Her voice felt rusty when it came to matters of the heart, but she pressed the green button. Hello? Hello, Elina. His voice was deep. It had a resonance to it, a rich baritone timbre that seemed to vibrate through to the phone line and settle in her chest. It wasn't the voice of a stranger. It sounded oddly familiar, like a song she had heard a long time ago and forgotten. "It is good to finally hear you," he said. His accent was refined, his cadence slow and deliberate. He didn't rush his words. That first phone call lasted for 3 hours. They didn't talk about the weather or the news. They talked about life. David told her about his day in the city, the chaos of traffic, the pressure of the boardroom. He described it vividly, painting a picture of a busy world that Elina was happy to be far away from. And then the conversation drifted into deeper waters. "I saw in your profile that you've been on a difficult journey," David said softly. The line was quiet for a moment. "Me too." He spoke of his divorce not with anger, but with a heavy, melancholic sadness. He told her briefly, without the sharp edges of detail, that his wife had found someone else, that he had given everything to a home that was eventually left empty. "I know what it's like," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper, "to come home to a house that feels too big, to wonder if you were the problem." Elina felt a tear slide down her cheek. She hadn't realised she was crying. She wiped it away quickly, though he couldn't see her. "Yes," she whispered back, "I know that feeling." She opened up to him just a little. She told him about the fear she used to live with. She didn't give him the gruesome details of the abuse. That was a door she kept locked. But she told him about the loneliness of being misunderstood, about the exhaustion of having to be strong all the time. "You don't have to be strong with me, Elina," David said. "With me, you can just be." Those words, they were like a balm on a wound. She didn't know it was still open. Over the next few weeks, David's voice became the soundtrack of her evenings, and the routine became a new ritual, as sacred as her morning coffee. She would come home from her federal office, change into her comfortable clothes, and wait. Around 8 p.m, her phone would light up. David calling. They developed a rhythm. He was in the city, surrounded by millions of people, but feeling alone. She was in the suburbs, surrounded by quiet, feeling the same. They were two satellites drifting in the dark, finally locking onto each other's signal. He was attentive. If she mentioned she had a headache on Tuesday, he would ask about it first thing on Wednesday. If she mentioned she was presenting a report, he would send her a text right before. "You're going to be brilliant. Just breathe." For the first time in years, Elina felt seen. Not looked at, but seen. One evening, Elina walked out to her back porch while on the phone with him. The night air was cool, smelling of damp earth and pine needles. Crickets were singing in the tall grass. "What are you doing now?" David asked. "I'm looking at the moon," Elina replied, looking up at the pale crescent hanging in the sky. "It's very bright tonight." "I'm looking at it too," David said, "from my balcony. It's the same moon, Elina. We aren't that far apart." The distance between them, the miles of highway and towns, seemed to shrink. It felt as though he was standing right there, leaning against the railing of her porch, his presence warm beside her. Elina closed her eyes, pressing the phone closer to her ear. She could hear him breathing, a slow, steady rhythm. "I'm glad I found you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "No, Elina," David corrected her gently. "We found each other. Two survivors in a lifeboat." They laughed softly, a shared intimate sound. As the weeks turned into a month, the caution Elina had felt began to evaporate. The defensive walls she had built brick by brick were not being torn down. They were simply opening a gate. David didn't demand entry. He stood outside and waited until she invited him in. He seemed to understand her need for pace. He never pushed. He never asked for things she wasn't ready to give. He just offered his voice, his time, and his understanding. Elina began to sleep better. The silence of her house was no longer empty. It was filled with the memory of their conversations. When she laid her head on the pillow, she would replay his words. She would imagine what he looked like when he laughed, the way his eyes might crinkle, just like hers in the photo. She felt a new sensation blooming in her chest. It was fragile, yes, but it was real. It was hope. One Friday night, after a particularly long week, David's voice was lower than usual. "I've been thinking," he said. "The phone is wonderful. Your voice is the best part of my day, but I find myself wanting more than just a voice." Elina's heart skipped a beat. She sat up a little straighter. What do you mean?" "I want to see the sanctuary you talk about," he said. "I want to drive to you." "I don't care about the distance. I just want to sit across from you and drink coffee. Would that be okay?" The question hung in the air. A month ago, the idea of a stranger coming to her town would have terrified her. But David wasn't a stranger anymore. He was the voice in the distance that had guided her back to herself. Elina looked around her living room. The shadows were soft. The house felt ready. "Yes," Elina said, a smile spreading across her face in the dark. "I think that would be very okay." "Then I'll see you this weekend," David promised. They said their goodnights. "Sleep well, Elina." "Sleep well, David." The call ended, but the warmth remained. Elina placed the phone on her nightstand. She turned off the bedside lamp and pulled the duvet up to her chin. Outside, the wind rustled the leaves of the oak trees, a gentle shushing sound. The world was vast and complicated, but in this room, everything was simple. She wasn't alone somewhere. In a city full of lights, a man was thinking of her just as she was thinking of him. The distance was closing. The voice was coming closer. Elina closed her eyes, and for the first time in a very long time, she drifted off to sleep with a smile on her lips, eager for the morning to come. As Elina finds her rest, let yourself sink into that same feeling of anticipation and comfort. The feeling that something good is on the horizon. Let the quiet of the night wrap around you like a warm blanket. Breathe in the peace. Breathe out the worry. You are exactly where you need to be. Saturday arrived wrapped in a blanket of mist. It was the kind of morning where the world feels small and private, the edges of the horizon softened by a gentle grey fog. But inside Elina's home, the energy was bright. She had woken up before her alarm, a rare occurrence. Usually she cherished the lazy sprawl of a weekend morning, but today there was a hum of anticipation in her veins. It wasn't anxiety, it was the fluttering excitement of a child waiting for a holiday. David was coming. He had texted her early, before the sun had fully broken through the mist. "On the road, the traffic is light and the coffee is hot. See you soon." Elina moved through her house with a sense of purpose. She tidied rooms that were already clean. She fluffed in the pillows on the sage green armchair, straightening the stack of books on the coffee table and wiping down the kitchen counter until the granite shone like a mirror. She wanted everything to be perfect. Not because she wanted to impress him with her housekeeping, but because she wanted her sanctuary to welcome him. She wanted him to step inside and feel the same peace that she felt. She chose her outfit carefully, a soft cashmere sweater, the colour of oatmeal, and comfortable jeans. She wore her hair down, letting it fall in loose waves around her shoulders. She wanted to look like herself, effortless and real. By noon, the mist had burned off, revealing a sky of piercing, brilliant blue. The sun warmed the front porch, drying the dew from the railing. Elina stood by the kitchen window, watching the driveway, her heart beat a steady rhythm against her ribs. She checked the time. He should be close. And then she saw it. A sleek silver sedan turned the corner at the end of the street. It moved slowly, navigating the quiet suburban curves with respect. As it approached her driveway, Elina felt a wave of calm wash over her nervousness. This was it. The voice was becoming a person. The car pulled into the driveway and came to a soft stop. The engine cut off, leaving only the sound of the wind in the oak trees. The driver's door opened. David stepped out. He was tall. Taller than she had imagined from his photos. He wore a navy blue jacket over a white shirt, looking casual yet undeniably put together. He stood by the car for a moment, looking up at the house, and then he looked at the window where she was standing. He couldn't see her clearly through the reflection of the glass, but he smiled. It was a warm, easy smile that reached his eyes. Elina took a deep breath, smoothing her hands over her sweater, and walked to the front door. She turned the lock, the click sounding loud in the quiet hallway, and pulled the door open. There was no screen between them now. No phone line, no internet connection. Just 10 feet of concrete walkway and the fresh autumn air. "Elina," he said. His voice was the same, that deep, resonant baritone that had lulled her to sleep so many nights. But hearing it in the open air, uncompressed by technology, was startlingly wonderful. "David," she replied, stepping out onto the porch. He walked up the steps, closing the distance. He didn't rush. He moved with a confident, easy grace. When he reached her, he didn't go for a handshake and he opened his arms. It felt like the most natural thing in the world to step into his embrace. He smelled of cedarwood, crisp citrus, and the faint, cool scent of the outdoors. His arms were strong, wrapping around her securely. For a long moment, they just stood there on the porch. Elina rested her head against his shoulder, letting out a breath she felt she had been holding for years. "You're real," she whispered against his jacket. "I am," he murmured, his chin resting gently on the top of her head. "And you are even more beautiful than the pictures." They pulled apart, but he kept one hand on her arm, a grounding touch, and he looked at her, really looked at her, with eyes that were kind and appreciative. "Shall we?" he asked, gesturing vaguely toward the world, or perhaps just the house. "Come in," she said. Walking him through her front door felt like a significant milestone. She was letting him into her inner world. David walked in with respect. He paused in the hallway, looking at the framed photos, the arrangement of the lilies, the way the light hit the floorboards. "It's peaceful here," he said quietly, "just like you described." "It's my haven," she replied. "I can feel it." Diana, they spent the first hour just sitting in the living room and drinking coffee. The transition from phone to person was seamless. There were no awkward silences, no stumbling over words. The chemistry that had built up over weeks of conversation flowed effortlessly into reality. He noticed the small things. He complimented the specific shade of green of her chair. He asked about the book on her side table. He was observant, attentive. Later in the afternoon, they decided to go for a drive. Elina wanted to show him her town. She sat in the passenger seat of his car, a pristine leather interior space that smelled of him. They drove to a nearby lake, a place Elina often went to think. The water was calm, reflecting the blue sky and the fiery oranges and reds of the changing leaves on the opposite bank. They walked along the shoreline, the gravel crunching softly under their shoes. David reached out and took her hand. His hand was large and warm, enveloping hers completely. It wasn't a demanding grip. It was an anchor. "I'm glad I came," he said, looking out over the water. "The city, it drains you. Being here with you, I feel like I can breathe again." "I'm glad you came too," Elina said. They found a small bench overlooking the water and sat for a long time, watching a pair of ducks glide across the surface, leaving V-shaped ripples in their wake. They talked about the future in vague, hopeful terms. David spoke of his desire to settle down again, to have a life that wasn't just about work and empty apartments. "I miss this," he admitted, "just sitting, sharing a view. It's the simple things that you miss the most when they're gone." Elina nodded, squeezing his hand. "Yes, the silence is better when it's shared." As the sun began to dip lower, casting long golden shadows across the grass, they went to a small Italian bistro in the town centre for an early dinner. The restaurant was cosy, smelling of garlic, basil and warm bread. They sat in a corner booth, bathed in the soft light of a table lamp. David ordered for them, navigating the menu with sophistication, but asking her preference at every step. He told her stories about his childhood, about his travels. He was charming, funny, and deeply engaging. Elina found herself laughing, a genuine belly laugh that surprised her. She realised she hadn't laughed like that in front of a man in a very long time. He watched her while she spoke, his gaze intense but gentle. It made her feel precious. It made her feel like the only woman in the room. "You have a lovely laugh," he said, breaking a piece of bread. "I want to be the reason you do that more often." Elina blushed, looking down at her plate. You're doing a good job so far. After dinner, he drove her back to her house. The evening air had turned crisp. He walked her to the door. He had booked a hotel in town, insisting that he wanted to respect her space and take things at the right pace. I don't want to rush this, he had told her earlier. You are too important to rush. That sentiment, that respect for her boundaries made Elina trust him even more. Standing on the porch under the soft glow of the amber porch light, the night felt magical. The crickets were singing their nightly chorus. Thank you for today, Elina said, turning to face him. No, David said softly, stepping closer. Thank you, Elina, for trusting me, for letting me in. He reached up and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers grazed her cheek, a touch that sent a shiver of warmth down her spine. He leaned in slowly, giving her ample time to pull away if she wanted to. But she didn't. She tilted her head up. His kiss was soft. It wasn't hungry or aggressive. It was a gentle pressing of lips, a question and an answer all at once. It tasted of the wine they had at dinner and the promise of tomorrow. He pulled back just an inch, his forehead resting against hers. I'll see you tomorrow morning, he whispered. Before I head back, I'll make breakfast, she promised. I'd love that. He squeezed her hands one last time, then turned and walked down the steps to his car. Elina stayed on the porch, wrapping her arms around herself against the chill, watching him go. She watched the red taillights of his car fade down the street until they disappeared around the bend. When she stepped back inside her house, the silence greeted her. But it was different now. The house felt fuller. It held the echo of his laughter, the scent of his cologne that lingered faintly in the hallway. Elina locked the door and leaned her back against it, closing her eyes. A smile played on her lips. She went through her nightly routine with a lightness in her step. As she washed her face in the bathroom mirror, she looked at her reflection. Her eyes were bright. Her skin looked radiant. He's real, she whispered to her reflection. And he's good. She changed into her pyjamas and climbed into bed. The sheets felt cool and crisp. She reached for her phone and just as she did, a text came through. Safe at the hotel. Already missing the view from your porch. Sleep well, Elina. She typed back, sleep well, David. She set the phone down and turned off the lamp. The darkness of the room felt velvety and soft. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, a lullaby of nature. Elina pulled the duvet up to her chin, curling onto her side. The anxiety of the past few years felt miles away, left behind on a distant shore. Here in the centre of her bed, she felt a profound sense of peace. She had taken a risk, she had opened the door, and in return the universe had sent her a long drive, a silver car and a hand to hold. As her breathing slowed, matching the rhythm of the night, Elina let herself drift. She drifted into a sleep that was deep, dreamless, and incredibly sweet. And as Elina holds onto that feeling of hope, let yourself hold onto it too. The feeling that good things can happen, that patience is rewarded. Let the warmth of the story settle in your chest. Relax your hands, relax your feet. Let the night take you. 2 months had passed since that first drive and the seasons were shifting. The crisp, golden edges of autumn were beginning to give way to the deeper, colder breath of early winter. Elina found herself packing a suitcase. It was a small, neat carry-on. She folded her professional blazers and her evening dresses with precision. She was headed to the city, David's city, for a 3-day official training conference. Usually trips to the metropolis were a source of mild stress for Elina. She preferred the quiet rhythm of her suburban life, but this time the city didn't feel like a chaotic giant. It felt like a destination of promise. She took the train. She loved the rhythmic clack-clack of the wheels on the tracks, a hypnotic sound that allowed her to watch the world blur by. Fields and forests gave way to industrial parks, then to suburbs, and finally the skyline rose in the distance, a jagged, majestic range of steel and glass, piercing the grey sky. When she arrived at Union Station, the air was different. It hummed with energy, but Elina felt grounded. She checked into her hotel, a respectable, quiet place near the conference centre. She attended her sessions, took notes and networked with colleagues, but a part of her was constantly checking the clock on the wall. She was waiting for 6 p.m. When the final session ended, she stepped out onto the sidewalk. The sun had set and the city had transformed. It was no longer a place of concrete and business. It was a tapestry of light. Headlights streamed like rivers of red and white gold. Skyscrapers were lit from within, looking like pillars of amber and diamonds. A black car pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down. "Need a lift?" a familiar deep voice asked. Elina smiled, her heart doing a familiar little flip. David was behind the wheel. She got in and the noise of the city instantly vanished, replaced by the soft hum of the climate control and the smooth jazz playing on the stereo. "Welcome to my world," David said, leaning over to kiss her cheek. He looked tired, perhaps from a long day at the office, but his eyes lit up when he saw her. "It's a beautiful world tonight," Elina replied. They didn't go to a restaurant immediately. David wanted to show her the city from his perspective. They drove through the avenues, passing historic theatres with their neon marquees buzzing, and parks where trees were wrapped in twinkling fairy lights for the upcoming holidays. They finally stopped at an upscale bistro in the financial district. It was the kind of place with velvet booths and waiters in white jackets who moved with the grace of dancers. Over dinner, sea bass and a dry white wine, the conversation flowed effortlessly. They were no longer two strangers getting to know each other. They were a couple. They had inside jokes now. They knew each other's coffee orders and favourite colours. "I'm so glad you're here," David said, reaching across the white tablecloth to take her hand. "The city feels different when you're in it, less lonely." "I'm glad to be here," Elina said, and she meant it. The noise, the crowds, none of it mattered. She was in a bubble of calm with him. As they left the restaurant, the night had turned colder. Elina wrapped her coat tighter around herself. "My hotel is just a few blocks that way," she said, pointing north. David paused on the sidewalk. The wind ruffled his hair. He looked at her with an intensity that made the rest of the street disappear. "Elina," he started, his voice low, "don't go to the hotel." "I have to," she smiled. "My things are there." "We can get them tomorrow," he said. "Come with me. Come to my place. I want you to see where I live. I want to wake up and make you coffee in my own kitchen." Elina hesitated for a heartbeat, and it was a big step, but the pool was magnetic. Why go back to a cold, impersonal hotel room when she could be with the man who had become her anchor? "Okay," she whispered. They drove to his building. It was a high-rise, sleek and modern. The doorman nodded to David as they walked in. The elevator ride was smooth and silent, lifting them higher and higher above the noise of the streets. When he opened the door to his penthouse, Elina's breath caught. The entire far wall was floor-to-ceiling glass. The city lay spread out below them like a glittering carpet of jewels. The view was breathtaking. The apartment itself was luxurious. Minimalist, modern furniture, expensive art on the walls, but it felt a little cold. A little staged. "It needs a woman's touch," David said, sensing her thoughts as he took her coat. "It's just a house, Elina. Not a home, not yet." He moved around the room, dimming the electric lights. He opened a drawer and pulled out several large pillar candles. He lit them one by one. The sharp edges of the modern furniture softened in the flickering golden glow. The room transformed from a showroom into an intimate sanctuary. He poured 2 glasses of wine and led her to the plush rug by the window. They sat there looking out at the skyline. David turned to her. The candlelight danced in his eyes. He looked serious, almost vulnerable. "Elina," he said, setting his glass down, "I have been thinking a lot about us, about time." "Time?" she asked softly. "We aren't 20 anymore," he said. "We've both been hurt. We've both lost years to people who didn't deserve us. I don't want to waste any more time on formalities." He shifted so he was kneeling on the rug facing her. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Elina's hands flew to her mouth. The world seemed to stop spinning. He opened the box. Inside sat a simple, elegant band with a single clear stone that caught the candlelight. "David," she breathed. "I know," he said quickly, "it's fast, and I know you want to do things properly. The papers, the registry, the licenses. We will do all of that, I promise. But those are just legalities. Those are for the government." He took the ring out of the box. "I want to make a commitment to you right now, before God, before the universe, a spiritual bond, an agreement between two souls that we belong to each other. No lawyers, no paperwork, just us." His voice was hypnotic, filled with emotion. He sounded like a man who had finally found his harbour after a long storm. "Marry me, Elina, here tonight. Be my wife in your heart and let me be your husband." Elina looked at the ring, then at his face. Her logical mind, the mind of a federal employee who dealt in rules and regulations, whispered that this was unconventional, that they should wait. But her heart was tired of waiting. Her heart was tired of being careful. She looked at this man who had driven hours to see her, who called her every night, who looked at her as if she were the only person in the world. She wanted to be chosen. She wanted to belong. The skepticism melted away like wax near a flame. She saw only love. She saw only a man who was so crazy about her that he couldn't wait for the bureaucracy of the state. "Yes," she whispered. Tears pricked her eyes. "Yes, David." He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. He kissed her hand, then pulled her into a tight embrace. "My wife," he murmured into her hair. "Finally." To Elina, in that moment, it felt more real than any paper certificate she had ever signed. It felt ancient and binding. That night, the penthouse didn't feel cold anymore. They stayed up late talking in hushed tones about how they would decorate the apartment, how she would transfer to the city eventually. He made promises, beautiful, shimmering promises that hung in the air like the scent of the candles. "We'll go to the city hall next month," he assured her, stroking her hair as they looked out at the sleeping city. "We'll make it legal for the world, but for us, the anniversary is tonight." "Tonight," she agreed. Eventually, the candles burned low. The city lights below began to dim as the metropolis finally went to sleep. David led her to the bedroom. It was vast and quiet. As Elina lay down, she felt a profound sense of arrival. She wasn't just Elina, the divorcee from the suburbs anymore. She was a wife again. She was part of a team. She fell asleep wrapped in his arms, the weight of the ring on her finger serving as a constant, tangible reminder of his promise. She didn't know the future. She didn't know what the morning would bring. But in the deep velvet darkness of that room, she felt safe. She felt loved. Outside the glass walls, the wind howled through the concrete canyons of the city, but inside everything was still. Elina drifted into dreams of a shared future, of morning coffees in this kitchen, of a life rebuilt from the ashes. It was the deepest, most trusting sleep she had known in years. And as Elina sleeps, wrapped in the comfort of her belief, let yourself find that same comfort in your own bed. Let the image of the city lights fading into the distance soothe your mind. You are safe. You are warm. The world continues to turn, but you can rest now. Winter arrived in earnest. The vibrant reds and golds of autumn had fallen, replaced by the stark, elegant lines of bare branches against a steel grey sky. In Elina's suburban town, the world moved a little slower. Frost coated the grass in the mornings, glittering like diamond dust under the pale sun. Elina returned to her home, her sanctuary, with a ring on her finger and a secret in her heart. The first few weeks after that night in the city were a blur of happiness. Even though she was back in her own house, miles away from the penthouse, she felt connected. She would look at the ring while typing reports at her office or while stirring her evening tea, and a small private smile would grace her lips. She wasn't just Elina anymore. In her heart, she was a partner. But time, as it always does, began to stretch. The intense marathon phone calls that had once lasted for hours began to shorten. At first it was subtle. A missed call here, a shorter conversation there. It's the end of the fiscal year, David told her one evening. His voice sounded rushing, the background noise of the city loud behind him. The office is chaotic. I just wanted to hear your voice for a minute. I understand, Elina said, sitting in her sage green armchair. Go do what you need to do. I'm here. She was supportive. She was patient. She knew that building a life required hard work, and she respected his ambition. She told herself that this distance was temporary, a necessary sacrifice for the future they were planning. But as the weeks turned into a month and then two, the rhythm of their connection began to falter. It was like a radio station that you love, slowly drifting out of frequency. And the music was still there, but it was fainter, interrupted by static. Elina found herself waiting more often than talking. The evenings, once filled with his baritone voice sharing stories of the day, became quiet again. She would sit by the fireplace, the book in her lap unread, checking her phone. Ding! A text message. Still at the office. Crazy night. Don't wait up, my love. Sleep well. Elina would type back. You too. Take care of yourself. She would turn off the lamp and go to bed alone, the silence of the house feeling a little heavier than before. The ring on her finger, once a symbol of immediate promise, began to feel like a question mark. She asked about the paperwork, about the City Hall registry he had promised. The lawyers are slow, David explained during one of their weekend calls. There is some complication with my divorce papers from years ago, a clerical error. It's frustrating, Elina, believe me. I want this done more than you do. He sounded so sincere. He sounded so victimised by the bureaucracy, and Elina, being a government employee herself, knew how slow red tape could be. So she believed him. She soothed him. It's okay, she would say. We have time. The paper is just paper. But a tiny, quiet voice in the back of her mind, a voice she tried very hard to ignore, whispered, Is it? Over the course of 4 months, David visited her only a handful of times. When he did come, it was like a whirlwind. The silver car would pull into the driveway, and for 24 hours, the world would be technicolor again. He was affectionate, passionate, and full of apologies. I miss you so much, he would say, holding her face in his hands. This distance is killing me. As soon as this project is over, as soon as the lawyers finish, we are going to be together every day. He would sweep her off her feet, literally and metaphorically. They would cook together, laugh together, and for those few hours, Elina's doubts would evaporate like mist in the sun. She would scold herself for doubting him. See, she would think, he loves me, he's just busy. But then Sunday evening would come. He would check his watch. The atmosphere would shift. He would pack his bag, kiss her goodbye, and drive away. And the silence would rush back in to fill the space that he left behind. It was the in-between times that were the hardest, the days when he didn't call at all, the times when her calls went straight to voicemail. Elina began to notice patterns she didn't want to see. He was unreachable on certain evenings. His phone would be off for hours at a time. When she asked, the excuses were always plausible, yet vague. A client dinner, a dead battery, a poor signal in the elevator. She sat in her kitchen one rainy Tuesday watching the droplets race down the window pane. It had been 4 months since the candlelight proposal, 4 months of living in a limbo between single and married. She traced the rim of her coffee mug with her finger. She felt a heaviness in her chest, a dull ache that wasn't quite pain, but a profound sense of lack. She missed the friend she had found in the beginning. She missed the man who wanted to know what she was reading, who cared about her headache. That man seemed to be fading, replaced by a busy executive who only offered her crumbs of his time. Why do I feel this way? She whispered to the empty room. She was a logical woman. She looked at the facts. He was successful. He was stressed. He was trying to merge 2 lives. It was natural for things to settle down after the honeymoon phase. But her intuition, that ancient feminine instinct that lives deep in the gut, was trying to send her a message. It was a gentle tapping on the shoulder, a whisper in the ear. Something isn't right. She tried to push it away. She busied herself with work. She reorganised her bookshelf. She baked bread, but the feeling remained. It was like a draft in a room with all the windows closed, a coldness you can't locate, but you can feel on your skin. One evening, after 3 days of silence from David, Elina finally called him. She didn't wait for him to call her. It rang 4 times before he picked up. Hey, he said. His voice sounded different, distracted, maybe even a little annoyed. Or was she imagining it? Hi, Elina said, keeping her voice light. I haven't heard from you. I was worried. I'm fine, Elina, he sighed. I told you, this week is a nightmare. I'm walking into a meeting right now. At 8 p.m, she asked. Yes, at 8 p.m. That's the job, Elina. Look, I can't talk right now. I'll call you tomorrow. David, wait. I have to go. Love you. Click. The line went dead. Elina slowly lowered the phone from her ear. She sat there in the darkness of her living room, the dial tone echoing in her mind. Love you? He had said the words, but they felt weightless. They felt like a habit, a punctuation mark at the end of a sentence rather than a declaration. She walked to the window. The street was empty. The street lamp flickered, casting long, dancing shadows on the pavement. She felt a profound sense of loneliness. It was a different kind of loneliness than before. Before David, her solitude was a choice. It was peaceful. Now her solitude felt like a waiting room. She was waiting for permission to start her life. She was waiting for a man who was slowly becoming a ghost. The ring on her finger felt heavy. She twisted it round and round. She wanted to believe. She wanted to trust the blueprint of the new life he had promised, but the foundation felt shaky. I need to see him, she thought. Not for a scheduled visit, not for a hurried weekend. She needed to see him in his element. She needed to look into his eyes and find the truth. She decided then, watching the rain fall, that she would go to the city again. She wouldn't ask for permission this time. She would just go. She needed to know if the magic was still there or if she was holding on to a fading echo. Elina went to bed that night with a resolve hardening in her heart. The sheets were cool. The house was quiet. But as she closed her eyes, she didn't dream of the future. She drifted into a restless sleep, listening to the wind, wondering why the man who had once driven through the night to see her now couldn't find 5 minutes to talk. The echo was fading, and Elina knew deep down that she had to find out why. As Elina drifts into her uneasy but necessary rest, let your own mind find a smoother path. Let go of the questions. Let go of the need to know the answers right now. Embrace the uncertainty as just another cloud passing through the sky. You are safe in your own stillness. The story will unfold in its own time. For now, there is only the rhythm of your breath and the comfort of the night. The decision to return to the city was made in a moment of quiet resolve. Elina didn't pack a suitcase full of hope this time. She packed a bag of necessities. She told herself she was going for a surprise visit to rekindle the flame that seemed to be flickering out. But deep down, in the quiet chambers of her intuition, she knew she was going to find an answer. The train ride was smooth, the rhythmic clatter of the tracks acting as a metronome for her thoughts. The city, when it appeared on the horizon, looked different than before. It wasn't a glittering kingdom of romance. It was a sprawling grid of steel and stone, a place where millions of lives intersected and overlapped. She arrived in the late afternoon. The sky was overcast, a blanket of soft grey clouds that diffused the light. Elina didn't go to a hotel. She took a cab directly to David's building. She knew his schedule. She knew he would be home from the office by now. She wanted to walk through the door, look him in the eye and see if the man she loved was still there. She stood in the lobby, the marble floor gleaming under her boots. She called him. David, she said when he answered, I'm downstairs. There was a silence on the other end, a silence that lasted 2 seconds too long. You what? His voice wasn't warm, it was tight. You're here? In the lobby? Yes, Elina said, trying to keep her voice steady. I wanted to surprise you. I missed you. Elina, you can't. He stopped himself. She heard the rustle of movement, the sound of a door closing. Stay there. Do not come up. I'm coming down. That sentence, do not come up, was the first crack in the glass. Minutes later, the elevator door slid open. David stepped out. He looked impeccable as always, but his eyes were darting, scanning the lobby. When he saw her, he didn't open his arms. He walked over briskly, taking her elbow and guiding her toward the exit, away from the concierge, away from the elevators. David, Elina asked, pulling back slightly. What's wrong? They stood on the sidewalk. The wind was picking up, tugging at Elina's coat. You should have called, he said, running a hand through his hair. He looked stressed, almost angry. You can't just show up here, Elina. I'm your fiancé, she said quietly, the word feeling strange on her tongue now. We made vows in that apartment. Why can't I go up? David sighed. A long, performative exhale. He looked her in the eyes, and for the first time, Elina saw the mask. It's the apartment, he said. I didn't want to tell you because I wanted it to be a surprise, but I'm having it renovated. It's a disaster zone right now. Dust everywhere, floors torn up. It's not safe for you to be there. Elina looked at him. She looked at his clean clothes, free of any dust. She remembered the silence in the background of his call. Renovations, she repeated flatly. Yes, it's a mess, he insisted. He pulled out his phone. I'll book you a room. The Four Seasons. You'll be comfortable there. I have a dinner meeting I can't get out of, but I'll come see you afterwards. He was managing her. He was handling her like a crisis at work, not like a woman he loved. He put her in a cab. He paid the driver. He didn't kiss her. Elina sat in the back of the taxi as it merged into the city traffic. She watched the red taillights blur through the window. She didn't cry. Instead, a strange, cold calm settled over her. It was the calm of a scientist who has finally proven a hypothesis. He was lying. She checked into the hotel. The room was luxurious, impersonal, and silent. She sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the ring on her finger. It glittered under the lamp, beautiful and hollow. She knew with absolute certainty that there were no renovations. She knew that the man she had built a sanctuary for in her heart was a stranger. Elina was a federal officer. She dealt with facts. She dealt with evidence, and now she needed the file to be closed. The next morning, she didn't call David. Instead, she made a different call. She contacted a private investigation firm, a discreet professional agency recommended by a colleague. She met the investigator in a quiet coffee shop. He was a kind-faced man who took notes while she spoke. She gave him David's name, his address, and the few details she knew. I just need to know the truth, she told him. I don't need drama. I just need to know who he really is. We will find out, the man assured her. Elina returned to her suburban home the next day. She told David she had a family emergency. It was the first lie she had ever told him, and it came easily. The bond was broken. The waiting period that followed wasn't agonising. It was a time of preparation. Elina went through her house. She cleaned. She organised. She prepared herself to let go. 4 days later, the email arrived. Elina sat at her kitchen table. The morning sun was streaming in, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, the same way it had on the day she first downloaded the dating app. It felt like a lifetime ago. She opened the file. The report was thorough. It was clinical. It was the truth. Subject, David. Last name. Status, married. Spouse, Dr. Sarah. Last name. Children, 2. Elina read the words. She looked at the attached photographs. There was David walking out of the same building she had been barred from entering. But he wasn't alone. He was walking next to a woman, a confident professional woman with kind eyes. They were holding hands. In another photo, he was loading groceries into an SUV. 2 children laughing in the back seat. There were no renovations. There was no difficult divorce. There was no ex-wife causing trouble. The report detailed everything. His wife was a doctor who worked in a different state for weeks at a time, dedicated to her patients. David used those windows of time to play the role of the lonely, divorced bachelor. He used his penthouse, his family home, as a stage set when they were away. Elina was not the only one. There had been others. Other women who were told they were the one. Other women who were promised a new life. Elina stared at the photos. She expected to feel shattered. She expected the floor to open up and swallow her whole. But instead she felt lighter. The heavy burden of confusion was gone. For months she had blamed herself. Am I not interesting enough? Am I too needy? Did I push him away? Why is the distance growing? She had carried the weight of the failing relationship on her own shoulders, thinking she was the problem. But now, looking at the undeniable truth on the screen, the weight vanished. It wasn't her. She wasn't unlovable. She wasn't broken. She was simply a player in a script she hadn't written. The man she loved didn't exist. David, the version of him who was a lonely, sensitive soul seeking a partner, was a character. A fiction. The real man was the one in the photos, a man capable of profound deceit. Elina took a deep breath. She felt the air fill her lungs, reaching all the way to the bottom. She looked around her kitchen, her sanctuary. It was still hers. He hadn't taken this from her. He had invaded her trust, yes, but he hadn't destroyed her foundation. She had survived a violent marriage before. She had survived the storms of her past. This was a deception, a mirage, and mirages, once understood, lose their power to hurt you. She closed the laptop. She walked to the window and looked out at her garden. The winter was ending. The first green shoots of spring bulbs were pushing through the soil, resilient and determined. I am okay, she whispered, and she was. The veil had been lifted. The world was sharp and clear again. The romance was alive, but her capacity to love, her capacity to trust, that was real. That belonged to her. He couldn't take that away. She took the ring off her finger. It slid off easily. She held it in her palm for a moment, feeling its cold metal. It was no longer a symbol of promise. It was just a piece of metal. Evidence. She placed it in an envelope. Elina felt a profound sense of self-respect rising within her. She knew what she had to do next, not out of anger, not out of a desire for revenge, but out of a desire for justice, for herself and for the other women who might fall into the same trap. But that was a task for the lawyers. That was a task for the daylight. For now, in the quiet safety of her home, Elina felt a peace she hadn't felt in months. The guessing game was over. The waiting by the phone was over. She was free. She walked to her bedroom, her steps light on the floorboards. The house felt welcoming, wrapping its arms around her. She was alone, yes, but she was no longer lonely. She was in the company of the truth. And the truth is the most comfortable companion of all. As Elina accepts the truth and finds her freedom, let yourself feel that same sense of release. Imagine setting down a heavy bag you've been carrying for miles. The relief in your shoulders, the lightness in your step. There is peace in knowing. There is peace in letting go. You are safe. You are strong. And you can rest now. The days following the revelation were quiet, but it was not a heavy silence. It was the light, airy silence of a room that has been thoroughly cleaned. Elina moved through her life with a new sense of precision. She did not confront David again. She did not send angry texts or demand explanations. She realised that engaging with a mirage only keeps you lost in the desert. Instead, she chose the path of dignity. She chose the path of law. On a Tuesday morning, under a sky of soft powder blue, Elina drove into the city one last time. She wasn't going to a penthouse or a romantic dinner. She was going to a quiet office building on a tree-lined street. Inside, the office of her legal counsel smelled of old paper, polished mahogany and leather. It was a grounding smell. She sat in a large, comfortable chair opposite a lawyer named Mr. Henderson, a man with kind eyes and a calm demeanour. Elina placed the manila envelope on the desk. Inside was the ring. Inside were the printed emails, the investigation report, the timeline of the deception. "This is everything," she said softly. Mr. Henderson nodded, placing a hand on the file. "We have it from here, Elina. We will file the charges for fraud and deception. We will ensure the authorities know about his history. You don't need to speak to him. You don't need to see him. We will be the shield. Elina felt a physical weight lift from her shoulders. It was a tangible sensation, as if a heavy winter coat had been taken off, leaving her light and free. Thank you, she whispered. She stood up and walked out of the office. As she stepped onto the sidewalk, she looked up. The sun was warm on her face. The city noise, the traffic, the chatter, the sirens faded into the background. It didn't belong to her anymore. She was no longer tied to this place. She got into her car and drove. She drove away from the skyline, away from the shadows of the skyscrapers, and turned her wheels toward home. As the city faded in her rearview mirror, she felt a sense of closure clicking into place. The chapter was done. The book was closed. When she arrived back at her sanctuary, the suburbs were in full bloom. Spring had finally defeated the last of the winter chill. The oak trees in her yard were dressed in vibrant, fresh green leaves that rustled cheerfully in the breeze. Elina walked up her driveway. She noticed the small things again, the way the light hit the brickwork, the sound of a neighbour mowing their lawn, the chirping of a robin perched on her mailbox. She unlocked her front door and stepped inside. The house greeted her. The scent of vanilla and old books wrapped around her. It was the smell of safety. She walked into the living room and looked at the sage green armchair. For a while, that chair had felt lonely. But now, looking at it, she just saw a comfortable place to sit. She realised something profound in that moment. David hadn't given her a sanctuary. She had built it herself. He hadn't given her the capacity to love. That was already inside her. He was just a visitor who had overstayed his welcome, and now that he was gone, the space was hers again. Elina spent the afternoon in her garden. She put on her gardening gloves and knelt in the rich, dark soil. She planted lavender and rosemary. She pulled up the weeds that had grown during her months of distraction. There is something healing about having your hands in the earth. It reminds you that life cycles, leaves fall, winter comes, but spring always returns. Nothing is permanent, not even pain. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in strokes of apricot and violet, Elina went inside to prepare for the evening. She showered, washing away the dust of the garden and the residue of the past few months. She put on her favourite silk pyjamas, the ones that felt cool against her skin. She went to the kitchen and made tea, not coffee. She didn't need the energy. She made a cup of herbal tea, watching the steam rise in gentle, swirling ribbons. She walked to the window, the same window where our story began. It wasn't raining tonight. The sky was clear, a vast canvas of indigo sprinkled with the first few stars of the evening. Elina thought about the women she was protecting by filing the lawsuit. She thought about the justice that was coming. But mostly, she thought about herself. She was 34. She was successful. She was resilient. She had opened her heart to love. And even though it was met with a lie, the fact that she could open it was a victory. It meant she wasn't broken. It meant she was brave. I am still here, she thought, and I am whole. She turned away from the window and walked through her quiet, beautiful house. She turned off the lights one by one. Click! The kitchen went dark. Click! The hallway fell into shadow. Click! The living room said goodnight. She entered her bedroom. The sanctuary within the sanctuary. The bed looked inviting, a cloud of white linens and soft pillows. Elina climbed in, pulling the duvet up to her chin. The sheets were crisp and cool. She reached for her phone on the nightstand. For months, this device had been a source of anxiety, a tether to a ghost. She checked the settings. Do not disturb. She set it down, screen facing the table. She closed her eyes. The silence of the house was no longer a void to be filled. It was a blanket. It was a presence. It was the sound of her own peace, reclaimed and fortified. She listened to the rhythm of her own breathing, in and out. She thought about the lavender she had planted. Down in the dark earth, the roots were already drinking, preparing to grow. Life was continuing. Elina felt a wave of drowsiness wash over her. It started at the top of her head, relaxing her scalp. It moved down her forehead, smoothing out the lines of worry. It flowed over her eyelids, making them heavy and sealed. It flowed down her neck, her shoulders, her arms, her hands, which had carried so much, were now open and resting on the mattress. The tension in her chest dissolved. Her heart beat with a slow, steady, powerful rhythm. She wasn't waiting for a text. She wasn't waiting for a visit. She wasn't waiting for permission to be happy. She was simply Elina, and that was enough. As she drifted on the edge of sleep, a final image came to her mind, not of the city, not of the man, but of herself, standing on a mountain peak, wind in her hair, smiling at the sun. The storm had passed. The air was clean. Elina let go. She sank deeper and deeper into the mattress, floating on a sea of tranquility. The night watched over her. The house protected her. And the dreamless, restorative sleep she had been craving for so long finally arrived to take her hand. Outro hypnotic induction. And now it is time for you to follow Elina into that deep, restful place. The story is over. The characters have found their peace. The book is closed and placed on the shelf. There is nothing left for you to track, nothing left for you to solve. Focus only on your breath. A slow, deep inhale, filling your lungs with calm. A long, slow exhale, releasing everything that no longer serves you. Imagine a soft, warm light surrounding your body. It is a shield of relaxation. Feel your legs becoming heavy. Feel your arms becoming heavy. Feel your entire body sinking down, down, down into the comfort of your bed. The world outside can wait. Tomorrow can wait. Right now, there is only the velvet darkness and the peace of this moment. You are safe. You are loved. You are at peace.